where the alphas are dominant and the heroines bring the sass. Quick question for the pack before we dive into the chaos today. Where are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments and drop a dog emoji if your own pet is sitting there judging your audiobook choices. Today, we have a wild one. It's funny, it's tense, and it involves a broke club waitress who accidentally triggers a mate bond with a grumpy, dangerous alpha king. But before we start, if you want to support the channel and get early access to slow burn stories like this, hit that join button down below. It helps us keep the lights on and the romance flowing. Now, take a deep breath. The club music is fading, and the king is demanding a private dance. Let's read. Chapter 1. The bass from the club speakers shook the sticky floorboards beneath Eden's boots. She kept her head down, dragging a wet rag across the scarred wooden bar. Spilled vodka and cheap beer left a sour smell in the air. Her shift ended in 2 hours. Tomorrow morning, her landlord expected $800 in cash. She had $84 crumpled in her tip jar. "I am going to end up sleeping in my car," Eden whispered to the empty glass she wiped. "I know it." Mila bumped hips with her. The other bartender popped the cap off a beer bottle with a neon pink opener. "Stop talking to yourself, Eden. You look crazy when you do that." "My car has a cracked mirror and bad suspension," Eden muttered, ignoring her. "My spine will snap in two if I try to sleep in the back seat. The heater doesn't even work. I will freeze." Mila sighed and leaned over the wet counter. She pointed her bright pink opener toward the raised VIP section in the far back of the room. Heavy velvet curtains framed the area, blocking out the worst of the flashing strobe lights. "You need rent money fast? Go look at the corner booth. Stop whining and hustle." Eden squinted through the shifting crowd. 6 giant men stood in a circle around a curved leather couch. They looked like brick walls shoved into dark clothing, their arms crossed over broad chests. At the center of the booth sat a man who commanded the entire space without moving a single muscle. He possessed a raw, intimidating presence. He had broad shoulders and a sharp jawline that looked cut from stone. A jagged scar cut through his right eyebrow, adding a violent edge to his face. His dark hair fell loose over his forehead. He wore a tailored raven-black suit that fit his frame with custom precision. On his right index finger, a thick, solid gold signet ring caught a stray beam of neon light. He tapped the heavy ring against the glass table with a slow, rhythmic beat. "He scares me," Eden muttered, shrinking behind the beer taps. "He reeks of cash," Mila shot back. "Look at the way those giant guys stand around him. Nobody even looks him in the eye. They all keep their heads down like he is royalty. Go over there, give him a show, get a tip to pay your landlord." Eden pushed a stray strand of dark, wavy hair back into her messy knot. She grabbed the edge of the bar. Her jet-black club uniform felt too tight across her chest. A safety pin dug into her ribs where the back zipper broke last week. She had no money to replace the dress. "I serve drinks, Mila. I don't grind on strangers for cash." "Do you want an eviction notice taped to your door at dawn?" Mila asked. Eden fell silent. She patted her right pocket. She felt the outline of her cheap, cracked smartphone and the dull brass house key attached to a faded red lanyard. Her safety net. She carried the lanyard everywhere. If things got bad, she could grab her keys and run out the back exit to her rusted, plum-colored Honda Civic. "Fine, I'll do it," Eden said. She grabbed a fresh bottle of expensive champagne from the ice bucket and a clean glass. She stepped out from behind the safety of the bar. The walk to the VIP section felt like marching toward a firing squad. The club crowd parted around her, giving her a wide path. She kept her eyes fixed on the man in the corner booth. He didn't watch the exotic dancers on the main stage. He stared straight ahead with a cold, ruthless expression. As she got closer, she noticed he radiated heat. Even from 10 feet away, Eden felt a wave of warmth hit her skin. It felt like standing next to an open furnace door. 2 of the giant men stepped in her path to block the booth. They glared down at her. "Bottle service," Eden said, lifting the champagne. The man in the center raised a single finger. The giants stepped aside in unison. Eden stepped up to the glass table. She set the bottle and glass down. Her hands shook, rattling the glass against the wood. She forced a smirk onto her face, building a temporary wall of fake sass to hide her panic. The man didn't reach for his drink. His gaze tracked her movements. "He stares like a predator," Eden whispered under her breath, turning away. The man's head snapped up. His dark eyes locked onto hers with sudden intensity. Panic spiked in Eden's chest. She had to commit now or lose her nerve. She stepped right up to the edge of the leather couch, threw her hips back, and dropped low, grinding against his thighs. Chapter 2. The moment her hips hit his thighs, a violent shudder ripped through the man. Eden froze mid-dance. She expected him to slide his hands to her waist, or maybe shove her away for crossing a line. Instead, his body stiffened like an iron board. A sharp, burning jolt shot through the air between them. It stung her skin, feeling like a live electrical wire snapping in two. Knox gripped the crystal whiskey glass in his left hand. The thick glass shattered under his raw strength. Shards rained down on the table with a loud crash. Amber liquid and bright red blood splashed across his knuckles. Eden scrambled forward, almost tripping over her own boots to get away from him. She spun around to face the booth. He ignored the bleeding cuts on his hand. He stared at her with a wild, untamed intensity that made her stomach drop to the floor. "Don't be a cheapskate, pay up," Eden whispered to herself, trying to keep her fake smirk alive while her heart hammered. "You break a glass, you tip the waitress. I need that $800. She assumed the thumping bass of the club hid her voice. It didn't. Knox heard every whispered syllable. His broad chest heaved. He ran hot by nature, radiating body heat like a furnace, and now that heat flared into overdrive, warming the entire VIP section. "Stop the music," Knox stated. His voice carried a heavy, dominant rumble that vibrated in the air. One of his guards tapped an earpiece. A second later, the club DJ killed the track. The sudden silence hit the room like a brick wall crashing down. Hundreds of people stopped dancing mid-step. Murmurs broke out across the sticky floor, but no one dared to raise their voice above a hushed whisper. The tension in the room thickened. Eden swallowed hard. Her safety pin dug deeper into her ribs, a sharp reminder of her broken zipper. The wall of fake sass she built began to crumble. She took a slow step backward, wanting to put distance between herself and the bleeding man. "I should get a broom," Eden whispered to the floor. "Clean up the glass, run to my car, drive away." Knox stood up. He towered over her, casting a long shadow. He rolled his broad shoulders, a gesture of pure irritation. He tapped his solid gold signet ring against the edge of the glass table. He didn't look at the confused crowd. He didn't look at his towering guards. His dark eyes stayed locked on Eden. "Private dance!" Knox roared, his voice echoing off the exposed brick walls. "Now!" The raw force in his tone sent 3 of the nearby club patrons straight to their knees. Eden blinked in shock. She watched the people drop to the floor, their hands covering their necks. Why are they falling down? She wondered. To her ears, the man was just yelling. He was loud, sure, but he possessed nothing that made her want to kneel in the spilled alcohol. "I don't do private dances," Eden said, finding a shred of courage. "I just bring the bottles. You have to go to the main stage for that kind of service." Knox stepped over the shattered crystal. He didn't ask her a second time. He flicked his chin toward his guards. 2 of the brick wall men stepped forward. They grabbed Eden by the upper arms. Their grips felt like steel clamps. "Hey, let go of me!" Eden shouted, kicking her legs. The guards ignored her struggles. They dragged her past the table, heading straight for the thick velvet curtains that hid the back hallways of the club. Eden kicked her boots, trying to land a hit on their shins, but they dragged her backwards with 0 effort. Mila stood behind the main bar, her mouth hanging open. She still clutched the neon pink bottle opener in her fist. "Call the cops, Mila!" Eden yelled over her shoulder. "Help me!" Mila didn't move an inch. Nobody in the club moved. They all stared at the floor, too terrified of the man in the dark suit to intervene. Knox walked behind the guards, his boots crunching on the broken glass. He wiped the whiskey and blood off his hand with a dark handkerchief. He kept his eyes fixed on the back of Eden's neck, tracking her scent. Chapter 3. The heavy velvet curtains swallowed the flashing strobe lights, plunging them into the shadows. The guards hauled Eden down a narrow, dimly lit hallway meant only for staff. The air back here smelled like stale beer and cheap chemical cleaning supplies. "You guys are making a huge mistake," Eden whispered, her breath coming in short gasps. "I have $84 to my name. I am not worth kidnapping. Nobody will pay a ransom for me." The guards didn't speak. They shoved her into a small, empty storage room at the end of the hall and shut the heavy wooden door behind her. Eden stumbled, catching herself against a stack of empty cardboard boxes. The room was cramped and dusty. A single bare bulb hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows. She spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. She looked for another exit, but the room only had the one door. The handle turned. The door pushed open, and Knox stepped inside. He filled the doorway, his broad shoulders leaving no room to escape. He shut the door behind him, turning the deadbolt with a loud, final click. The small space grew 10 degrees hotter in seconds. His dark eyes tracked her every movement, watching her chest rise and fall. Eden backed up until her shoulders hit the cold concrete wall. She slid her right hand into her pocket. Her fingers bypassed the cracked screen of her phone and closed tight around the dull brass house key attached to her faded red lanyard. She gripped the metal, ready to use it. "Listen, whatever mob boss you work for, I don't know him," Eden said. She kept her voice steady, even though her knees shook under her black uniform. "I serve drinks. That is my only job." Knox didn't answer her. He stepped closer. He rolled his shoulders again, moving with a strange, feral grace that didn't belong in a cheap nightclub. He stopped mere inches from her. Eden had to crane her neck to look up at his face. He leaned down. Eden tensed her muscles, ready to strike out. Instead of grabbing her, Knox buried his face in the crook of her neck. He inhaled a deep breath. A low, vibrating growl rumbled deep in his chest, vibrating against her collarbone. "Cedar and rain," Knox murmured, his voice rough and strained. Eden shivered. The heat radiating off his chest seeped into her skin, warming her from the outside in. "What are you talking about? Get away from me!" She pushed her hands against his chest. It felt like shoving a solid oak door. He didn't budge an inch. Knox pulled back just enough to look at her face. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the dark color of his eyes. "Mine," he growled, the words sounding primal. "I'm not your anything," Eden whispered, panic taking full control of her brain. She yanked her right hand out of her pocket. She drove the dull brass key straight toward his left arm. She put all her weight behind the strike, aiming for the muscle. The brass tip tore through the expensive fabric covering his arm and pierced his skin with a sickening tear. Knox looked down at his arm. He didn't flinch away. He didn't cry out in pain. He stared at the brass key sticking out of his bicep like it was a minor annoyance, a splinter he picked up by mistake. He reached over with his right hand, the solid gold signet ring flashing under the bare bulb. He gripped the key and pulled it out. A single drop of dark blood welled up from the cut. Before Eden's eyes, the edges of the wound stopped bleeding and began to knit together, sealing the skin shut. Eden stopped breathing. Humans didn't heal in seconds. Only monsters did. She ripped the faded red lanyard from his hand, snatching her brass key back. She shoved past his wide frame, diving for the deadbolt on the heavy metal door. She needed to get to her rusted plum Honda. Knox let her touch the cold metal lock. Then, his large hand closed over her wrist. He pinned her arm flat against the door, trapping her in place with zero effort. Chapter 4. Eden thrashed against his iron grip. She kicked her leg back, aiming the heel of her boot for his knee. Her boot connected with solid muscle. Knox didn't even shift his stance. He stood rooted to the floor. "Let me go!" she screamed, dropping her wall of fake sass. The fear in her voice echoed in the small room. "You freak!" "Stop fighting," Knox commanded. His voice held that heavy, crushing weight again, the same tone that sent patrons to the floor. Eden ignored it. The tone meant nothing to her ears. She twisted her wrist, feeling the friction burn her skin. "I will scream until someone calls the police. They will arrest you." Knox sighed, a harsh sound in the dusty storage room. He let go of her wrist and caught her by the waist. In one smooth motion, he hauled her off the floor and threw her over his broad shoulder. "Put me down!" Eden yelled, pounding her fists against his back. It felt like punching a brick wall. Her knuckles throbbed with blunt pain. Knox unlocked the deadbolt and carried her out of the storage room. He didn't head back toward the loud club floor. Instead, he pushed through the heavy metal exit door at the end of the dark hall. The cool night air hit Eden's face, a sharp contrast to his burning body heat. They were out in the back alley behind the club. A matte, raven-black SUV idled near the dumpsters, the engine purring. Two more giant guards stood by the rear doors, watching their approach. "Open the back," Knox ordered. A guard pulled the rear door open. Knox tossed Eden onto the leather back seat. She scrambled to the opposite side, grabbing the door handle. She pulled it hard. It gave a dead click. Child locks. "You cannot do this to me," Eden shouted, pressing her face against the tinted glass. "I have rent due tomorrow morning, $800. My landlord will throw my stuff on the street." Knox climbed into the SUV beside her. He slammed the heavy door shut, sealing them inside the quiet cab. The rich smell of expensive leather filled the space, wiping out the alley stench. "Drive," Knox told the man in the front seat. The SUV pulled out of the dirty alley, leaving the flashing neon signs of the club behind in the dark. Eden shrank against the passenger door. She pulled her knees to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible. She slipped her hand back into her right pocket, making sure her cracked phone and brass key were still there. The faded red lanyard wrapped around her shaking knuckles. "You are crazy," Eden whispered into the dark cab, staring at the floorboards. "You are a psycho, a rich, crazy psycho who thinks he can steal people." Knox sat in the center of the seat, taking up far too much space. He unbuttoned his jacket, looking unfazed by her insults. His super senses picked up every whispered word. "I am taking you home," Knox said, his tone flat and uncompromising. "My apartment is on 4th Street, Eden shot back, gripping her lanyard tighter. "And my car is parked in the alley. It has a cracked mirror and rusted doors, but it is mine. You cannot just steal me away from my job." Knox turned his head to look at her. The jagged scar on his right eyebrow caught the yellow glow of the passing streetlights. "You do not live on 4th Street anymore," Knox stated. He tapped his solid gold signet ring against the leather armrest, the metal clinking in the quiet car. "And you won't need the Honda." Eden stared at him. The sheer authority in his voice chilled her bones. She pulled her cracked phone from her pocket and tapped the screen. The glass stayed black. A dead battery. She was trapped in a moving fortress with a man who healed from stab wounds in seconds. He ran hot like a furnace, moved like a predator, and he had just claimed her as his own. She rested her head against the cold window and closed her eyes, trying to figure out how to escape a monster. Chapter 5. The tires crushed the gravel with a relentless crunch. Eden kept her face pressed against the chilled glass. The city vanished behind them. Tall, twisting branches replaced the familiar skyline. The darkness outside felt heavy, pressing in on the tinted windows. She flexed her right hand. A sharp ache shot through her knuckles. Hitting his back felt like punching solid brick. She shoved her hand deep into her pocket, the dull brass key pressed against her palm, the faded red lanyard tangled around her fingers. She slid her thumb over her smartphone screen. Still dead, still useless. "He brings me to the woods to dig my own grave," Eden whispered to the floor mats, assuming the rumble of the engine masked her voice. I will die out here over a stupid $800 debt. Knox moved on the leather seat beside her. The ripped fabric of his left sleeve parted. Beneath the torn material, unbroken skin stretched over defined muscle. No wound, no scar. The dried blood on his left hand crusted over his knuckles. He radiated heat like a stoked furnace. The temperature in the cab climbed, making sweat prickle along Eden's hairline. No one is digging graves, Knox said. His voice sliced through the heavy silence. Eden flinched. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a judge's gavel striking wood. She turned to face him. You heard that? I hear every breath you take, Knox stated. Stop whispering about your death. It irritates me. Eden pushed herself further into the corner of the seat. The man survived a brass key to the bicep without a flinch. He picked up quiet murmurs over road noise. What are you? She demanded, dropping the whisper. I am the one keeping you alive, Knox replied. The SUV swerved around a sharp bend. The headlights illuminated a sprawling stone estate rising from the trees. High, wrought-iron gates blocked the road. 2 armed men stood in the shadows. They spotted the vehicle, lowered their rifles, and pushed the heavy gates apart. It is a compound, Eden whispered, her throat tight with panic. A rich, crazy cult compound. Not a cult, Knox answered, not bothering to look at her. The vehicle stopped in front of a towering oak entrance. Knox opened his door and stepped into the cool night. He circled the hood and pulled Eden's door wide open. Out, he commanded. Eden gripped the leather seatbelt. No, take me to 4th Street. My landlord will throw my mattress in the alley tomorrow. Knox leaned in, broke her grip on the belt, and hauled her out. He tossed her over his shoulder. Eden pounded her fists against his back, ignoring the fresh wave of pain in her knuckles. Knox marched up the stone steps, entirely unbothered by her attacks. Chapter 6. Knox carried Eden through the towering oak doors. The grand foyer stretched out with polished hardwood floors and high-arched ceilings. The air smelled of old wood and burning logs. Several men and women walked through the halls. When Knox entered, every person stopped dead. Their conversations died in their throats. They pressed their backs against the walls and lowered their heads, refusing to make eye contact with the man carrying her. The sheer level of submission sent a fresh wave of terror down Eden's spine. Put me down, you psycho! Eden yelled, slamming her aching fists against his shoulder blades. Knox ignored her. He took the grand staircase 2 steps at a time. His boots thudded against the rich carpet runner. He turned down a long, dimly lit hallway on the 2nd floor. He stopped in front of a solid wooden door and turned the brass knob. He stepped inside and dumped Eden onto a plush mattress. Eden scrambled backward, her boots sinking into the thick duvet. Knox stood in the doorway, blocking her path to the hall. Stay here, Knox said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Do not try to leave. He pulled the door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place with a heavy, final sound. Eden leaped off the bed and lunged across the room. She grabbed the brass handle and twisted. Locked. She took a step back and kicked the solid wood paneling with the toe of her boot. A sharp, blinding pain shot up her leg. The wood did not crack. It did not even dent. Ow! Eden hissed, hopping backward on one foot. She collapsed onto the edge of the mattress, rubbing her bruised toes. I am trapped in a cult house with a broken toe. I will never see my Honda again. A low, scratchy sound came from the corner of the room. Eden froze. She turned her head, searching the shadows near a large mahogany wardrobe. A small shape moved into the light of the bedside lamp. A wire-haired Jack Russell Terrier tilted its head at her. The dog had patchy brown spots over its eyes and an untrimmed, scruffy coat. It let out a sharp, high-pitched bark that echoed against the stone walls. Shh, Eden hissed, waving her hands. Don't bark. The cult leader will come back. The terrier did not listen. It bounced on its front paws, radiating chaotic energy. It sprinted across the rug, leaped onto the mattress, and tackled Eden's lap. Eden gasped, falling back against the pillows. The tiny dog scrambled up her chest and licked her chin with a rough, wet tongue. Its tail wagged so hard its entire back half vibrated. Okay, stop, Eden whispered, pushing the scruffy head away. The dog whined, nudging her hands for more attention. You belong to the psycho who kidnapped me? You do not match his aesthetic at all. The terrier spun in a tight circle, curled into a ball on her stomach, and let out a content sigh. Eden rested her hands on the dog's coarse fur. She needed a plan. She needed an exit before the man with the heavy vibe returned to finish whatever dark game he started. She squeezed her brass key tight, letting the metal bite into her palm to keep herself awake. If he came back through that door, she would not go down without a fight. The terrier snored, a loud, oblivious sound in the silent room. Eden watched the locked door, waiting for the deadbolt to click open again. Chapter 7. An hour passed. Eden paced the length of the plush rug. The Jack Russell Terrier followed her every step, bouncing at her heels like a scruffy shadow. She named him Buster in her head, mostly because he looked like a menace who broke things. Listen, Buster, Eden whispered, pointing to the locked door. If that giant man comes back in here, you have to bite his ankles. Give me a distraction so I can run. Buster let out a sharp yip and dropped into a play bow, tail wagging furious circles. You are useless, Eden sighed. Heavy footsteps sounded in the hallway. Eden stopped pacing. She backed up against the wall, her hand reaching into her pocket to grip her brass key. Buster trotted right to the door and sat down, letting out a happy whine. The deadbolt clicked. The handle turned. Knox stepped into the room. He carried a heavy wooden serving tray. A plate of thick, roasted meat and warm bread sat in the center. He still radiated that intense, suffocating heat. The dried blood remained flaked on his knuckles. Buster exploded into motion. The tiny dog launched himself at Knox's boots, barking with wild, fearless energy. Knox reached down with his uninjured hand and scooped the terrier up. Buster licked the man's jawline, tail thumping against his broad chest. Down, Knox ordered, his heavy voice turning surprisingly gentle. He set the dog back on the floor. Buster spun in a circle and tackled Eden's boots next. Knox placed the wooden tray on a small side table. Eat. Eden stayed pressed against the wall. I am not eating your food. I want to leave. I have a shift tomorrow night and I owe rent in the morning. Knox straightened up. He crossed his arms over his torn suit jacket. You no longer work at the club. Your rent is irrelevant. Irrelevant? Eden choked out, her fake sass flaring up to cover her deep panic. Easy for you to say. You live in a stone castle. If I don't pay my landlord, I sleep on concrete. You sleep here, Knox stated, his dark eyes tracking the fear on her face. Eden glared at him. She broke eye contact, looking down at Buster chewing on her shoelace. He is a psychotic control freak with a god complex, she whispered to the dog. He thinks he can just buy people and lock them in rooms. Knox rolled his shoulders, a tight, irritated movement. I did not buy you, and I am locking you in this room to keep you safe from what is out there. Eden's head snapped up. She stared at him, her chest heaving. Stop doing that! Stop answering my whispers! It is unnatural. Then speak to me directly, Knox countered. Fine. Eden stepped away from the wall, pointing a shaking finger at his chest. Let me go. Whatever you want from me, I don't have it. I am broke. I am nobody. I just wanted a tip. Knox closed the distance between them in 2 long strides. He stopped inches from her. The heat rolling off his body made her skin flush. You are not nobody, Knox growled, his voice vibrating in the quiet room. You belong to me. Eden laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. I belong to my debt collectors. Get in line. Knox stared down at her. A muscle ticked in his jaw. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his hand. He simply turned around and walked toward the door. "Eat the food before it goes cold," Knox said, stepping out into the hallway. "I hope you choke on it," Eden yelled after him. The door slammed shut. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy thud. Eden dropped her head into her hands. Buster whined and pawed at her knee. She looked over at the wooden tray. Her stomach gave a loud, painful rumble. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. "Fine," Eden whispered, walking to the table. "But I am only eating the bread." She tore off a piece of the warm crust and shoved it into her mouth. The food tasted rich and heavy, grounding her spinning thoughts. Buster sat at her feet, staring up with wide, begging eyes. Eden sighed and tossed him a piece of the roasted meat. The dog swallowed it whole. She had to find a way out of this stone fortress before the psycho returned to claim whatever twisted ownership he thought he had over her. Chapter 8. Eden finished the bread and paced the length of the room again. Buster shadowed her steps, fueled by the roasted meat she surrendered to him. The iron bars on the window offered no escape. The solid door held firm against her weight. She needed leverage. She needed a weapon bigger than a dull brass key. She searched the room. The mahogany wardrobe held nothing but empty wooden hangers. The bedside tables contained blank notepads and expensive pens. No scissors, no letter openers, nothing sharp. Eden stopped in front of a reading chair in the corner. A heavy brass floor lamp stood next to it, casting a pool of warm light on the rug. She gripped the metal pole. It felt cold and dense. She twisted the top section, unscrewing the heavy brass base from the bulb housing. It took a few minutes of grinding the metal threads, but the heavy pole finally broke free. She weighed the brass pipe in her hands. It gave her a solid, 2-foot blunt weapon. It wasn't a sword, but it felt better than empty fists. "If he tries to grab me again, I swing for the knees," Eden whispered, tapping the pipe against her palm. Buster let out a low rumble in his throat, his ears pinned back against his scruffy head. He trotted away from Eden and planted himself in front of the locked wooden door. Deep, booming voices echoed up through the floorboards. Eden froze. She tightened her grip on the brass pipe. The voices drifted from the main floor of the estate. They sounded rough, angry, and violent. Several men shouted over one another. A loud crash reverberated through the wood beneath her boots, like heavy furniture smashing against a stone wall. "Traitors!" a raw voice roared from downstairs. Eden backed into the far corner of the bedroom, holding the pipe like a baseball bat. The cult members were fighting. If they breached her door, she would not survive a brawl with giants who healed from stab wounds. Footsteps thundered up the staircase. They hit the carpeted hallway, moving fast and heavy. Eden stopped breathing. Buster barked, a sharp, aggressive warning at the door. The deadbolt clicked. The door flew open. Knox filled the frame. He looked dangerous. The intense heat radiating from him seemed to warp the air around his broad shoulders. His dark eyes swept the room, landing on Eden crouched in the corner with her improvised weapon. "Put the pipe down," Knox ordered, his voice tight with restrained violence. "No," Eden fired back, raising the brass pipe higher. "Who is screaming downstairs? What is happening?" "Pack business," Knox said. He did not step into the room. He kept his hand on the doorframe, his knuckles white. "Do not open this door for anyone but me. Keep the dog quiet." "Pack?" Eden repeated, her mind spinning to process the bizarre word. "What kind of pack?" A terrifying feral snarl ripped through the hallway behind Knox. It did not sound human. It sounded like a wild beast tearing through concrete. Eden's blood ran cold. The brass pipe trembled in her grip. Knox didn't flinch at the sound. He looked at Eden, his expression hardening into pure, ruthless authority. "Stay in this room. If you step out into that hall, I cannot guarantee your safety." He pulled the door shut before she could argue. The deadbolt slid back into place, locking her inside once more. Eden stood frozen in the corner. The shouting downstairs grew louder, vibrating up the walls. The sound of breaking wood and heavy thuds filled the estate. Whatever lived inside this compound, it was tearing itself apart. She lowered the brass pipe, realizing how useless a metal stick would be against the monsters roaring beneath her feet. Buster whined, pressing his small body against the bottom of the locked door. Eden walked over and scooped the trembling terrier into her arms. She carried him back to the corner, sinking down onto the floor with her back against the wall. She clutched the brass pipe in one hand and held the dog tight with the other. The floorboards shook again. A deep, guttural roar shook the dust from the ceiling rafters. It sounded like an animal caught in a brutal fight to the death. Eden squeezed her eyes shut. She thought about her cramped apartment, her rusted car, and the $800 she owed. She would give anything to be back in that loud, cheap nightclub wiping up spilled beer. Tonight, survival meant staying silent in the dark and praying the lock held firm. Chapter 9. The raw roars downstairs faded into a low, threatening grumble. Eden kept her back pressed against the bedroom wall. Her bruised toe throbbed inside her boot. Her knuckles ached with a deep, pulsing pain. She gripped the heavy brass pipe tight. Buster sat beside her, his scruffy ears twitching at every creak of the floorboards. The terrier let out a soft whine. "I cannot stay in this box," Eden whispered, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. "If that psycho loses his fight, whoever wins will come up here next. I have to leave." She stepped away from the wall and approached the heavy door. The deadbolt held the wood firm in the frame. Eden studied the thick brass lock. She had no key for this side, but she remembered her first cramped apartment in the city. Her old landlord locked her out over a missed payment. She learned a desperate trick to get her belongings back. She did not need to pick the lock. She needed to break the frame. Eden wedged the flattened, threaded edge of the brass pipe into the tight gap between the door and the wooden molding. She aimed right next to the deadbolt strike plate. Her bruised hands trembled. She took a deep breath, braced her boots against the rug, and threw her whole body weight against the metal pole. The old wood let out a sharp, resisting groan. Eden gritted her teeth. She pulled the brass pipe back and slammed it into the gap again. Splinters cracked and fell to the floor. She used the pipe as a crude crowbar, pushing with all the strength her tired muscles could manage. With one final, violent shove, the wooden door frame split right down the middle. The metal deadbolt ripped through the splintered wood. The door swung open, hitting the hallway wall with a dull thud. Eden let out a shaky gasp. She stepped out of the bedroom and into the dim, carpeted hallway. Buster trotted right past her ankles. "No, stay inside," Eden whispered, reaching for the dog. The terrier ignored her command. He took the lead, his nose pressed to the rich carpet runner. Eden had no choice but to follow the tiny animal. She kept the brass pipe raised, ready to swing. She limped down the hall, favoring her throbbing toe. The second floor of the stone estate felt vast and empty. Large oil paintings lined the walls, their subjects hidden in the thick shadows. The air felt cold out here, missing the suffocating heat Knox brought into a room. Eden crept toward a back stairwell. The rumble of voices grew louder, drifting up the stone steps. She crouched behind a thick wooden pillar at the top of the landing. Buster sat next to her. For once, the dog stayed quiet. Two men stood on the landing below. They wore ripped denim and heavy work boots. Dirt and fresh blood smeared their bare arms. "The boss made a real mess of him," the taller man grunted. He wiped a red smear from his chin. "He asked for it," the second man replied, leaning against the stone railing. "You do not challenge the king in his own house. Not when the full moon is next week. Everyone is running hot. Tempers are short. The beast wants out." "Still," the tall man said, shaking his head. "He ripped the rogue's throat out in one move. I heard the bones snap from the courtyard. We need to keep our claws sharp tonight. The rest of the rogue pack might breach the outer gates." Eden pressed her free hand over her mouth. Her breathing grew rapid and shallow. Her chest heaved. Claws? Ripped throats? The full moon? "They are not mobsters," Eden whispered into her palm. Her mind scrambled to process the bizarre words. Mobsters used guns. They used knives. They did not talk about sharpening claws or howling at the moon. The tall man at the bottom of the stairs stopped talking. His head snapped up. His nostrils flared wide, taking in a deep breath. He stared straight up the dark stairwell, his eyes catching the dim light. "I smell fear," the man growled, his voice dropping into a rough animal register. "Sour sweat and terror. The human is out." Chapter 10. Eden froze behind the wooden pillar. The tall guard did not pull a weapon. He just stared up the shadows, his chest expanding as he took another deep sniff of the air. He tracked her exact location through the scent of her panic. "Get back to your room, human," the guard ordered. His voice echoed up the stone steps. "The king gave strict orders." Eden did not answer. She tightened her grip on the brass pipe. Her bruised knuckles throbbed with a fresh spike of adrenaline. She stepped back from the pillar, preparing to run back down the long hallway. The guard took the first stone step. "Do not make me chase you." Eden spun around. She broke into a sprint. Her heavy boots pounded against the carpet runner. She ignored the sharp sting in her bruised toe. She needed to find an exit door, a window, or anywhere that did not smell like blood and monsters. Heavy footsteps thundered up the stairwell behind her. The guard moved with unnatural speed. He cleared the landing in seconds. Eden glanced over her shoulder. The large man charged down the hall, closing the distance between them with terrifying ease. Humans did not run that fast. "Hey, stop!" the guard shouted. Eden swung her brass pipe in a wild arc behind her, hoping to clip his knees. She missed the air. The weight of the swing threw her off balance. She stumbled sideways, crashing her shoulder into the wall. The guard reached out, his thick fingers hooking the fabric of her shoulder. A high-pitched, furious bark erupted from the floorboards. Buster launched himself into the air. The tiny Jack Russell Terrier flew at the guard's heavy work boots. The dog clamped his jaws around the man's thick ankle, sinking his teeth through the denim fabric. The guard let out a surprised yell. He jerked his hand back, letting go of Eden's shoulder. He tried to shake his leg, but Buster held on tight, growling around a mouthful of fabric and skin. "Get this rat off me!" the guard cursed. He lifted his boot, trying to dislodge the angry terrier. He did not kick the dog. He did not strike the animal. The guard knew better than to hurt the king's spoiled pet. Eden used the chaos. She regained her footing and ran. She left the back hallway behind and sprinted toward the main section of the estate. The grand foyer opened up ahead of her. Bright light spilled from the chandeliers hanging from the arched ceiling. She heard the guard still fighting with Buster in the distance. The terrier unleashed a rapid fire of high-pitched barks, keeping the giant man occupied. Eden reached the top of the grand staircase. She gripped the polished wooden banister and rushed down the steps. She scanned the ground floor for the oak front doors. If she could reach the driveway, she could hide in the dark woods. She could find a road. She could escape the compound. She hit the bottom step and rounded the corner into the main hall. She slammed to a halt. The breath left her lungs in a rush. The main hall was destroyed. Smashed wooden chairs covered the floor. Deep, jagged gouges scarred the plaster walls. The expensive rugs lay bunched up and stained with dark, wet patches of fresh blood. But the damage was not what made Eden freeze. 20 giant men and women stood in a wide circle in the center of the ruined room. They wore torn clothes and dirt-smudged jackets. Some wiped blood from their faces. Others flexed their hands, their muscles coiled tight with aggressive energy. When Eden's boots scuffed the floorboards, every single head turned. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The room went dead silent. The heavy, suffocating tension in the air pressed down on her shoulders. She stood at the edge of the circle, clutching a piece of a brass lamp, staring at a room full of killers. The crowd parted. A man stepped into the center of the circle. He did not look at Eden. He glared across the broken furniture at the far side of the hall. "This is what you bring into our territory?" The stranger spat, his voice laced with venom. He pointed a thick finger straight at Eden. A weak, trembling human? Eden traced the man's pointing finger across the room. Knox stood in the shadows near the grand fireplace. He ran a hand through his dark hair, his jaw set in a hard, brutal line. "She is mine," Knox growled. His voice vibrated through the floor. "Step away from her, Torin." Chapter 11. The man named Torin did not step away. He turned his full attention to Eden. He had a thick, unkempt beard and pale, wild eyes. He stepped closer to her, his heavy boots crunching on the splintered wood covering the floor. "A human," Torin repeated, a sneer twisting his mouth. "The Alpha King claims a fragile little human waitress. The rumors were true. You have gone soft, Knox. You lead us into a war with the rogues, and you bring this pathetic creature into our stronghold." Eden gripped her brass pipe with both hands. Her knuckles burned. She wanted to step back, to run back up the stairs, but her legs refused to move. The sheer, terrifying presence radiating from the 20 people in the room pinned her to the spot. They watched her with predatory focus. "I said step away from her," Knox warned. The air in the main hall grew hotter. The intense heat rolled off his broad shoulders, warming the cold stone room. "Or what?" Torin challenged, turning back to face Knox. The rival leader threw his arms out wide. "You will command me? I do not answer to your heavy voice, King. My pack answers to me. We bleed to keep these borders safe from the rogues. We fight the battles, and you sit on your throne keeping a human pet in the guest room." Murmurs broke out among the 20 people in the circle. A few nodded in agreement with Torin. The tension in the room thickened into something violent and ugly. Eden swallowed hard. Her throat felt like sandpaper. "I am not a pet," she whispered to the floor, her voice shaking. "I just want to go home to my apartment." Torin let out a harsh bark of laughter. He looked at Eden, his pale eyes flashing with cruel amusement. "She whispers to the floor. She cannot even look us in the eye. This is your queen? A girl who shakes at a loud noise?" Knox moved. He did not walk. He crossed the ruined hall in a blur of motion. 1 second he stood by the fireplace, and the next he stood directly between Eden and Torin. Eden gasped, taking a stumbling step backward. Knox shielded her with his wide frame. The heat coming off his body felt like a physical barrier between her and the hostile room. "Do not speak to her," Knox stated. His voice lacked any yell or roar. It held a cold, dark promise of violence. "Do not look at her. If you take one more step toward my mate, I will end you." The word mate echoed in the silent hall. Torin's sneer faded. His face turned red with sudden, unchecked rage. "You insult the old bloodlines. You insult every wolf in this room. You are unfit to lead the factions." "Challenge me, then," Knox said, dropping his arms to his sides. The circle of people backed up, giving the 2 men a wide berth. They cleared the center of the room, leaving only broken furniture in the ring. Eden stood behind Knox, her fingers white-knuckled around the brass pipe. She had no idea what a challenge meant, but the smell of raw, sour sweat filled the air. "I will," Torin roared. The rival leader did not pull a gun. He did not reach for a knife. Instead, he dropped into a low crouch. A sickening sound filled the room. It sounded like thick branches snapping in half. Eden watched in horror as Torin's hands morphed. His fingers stretched, the bones breaking and pushing against the skin. Thick, dark fur sprouted from his knuckles. His fingernails elongated, sharpening into thick, curved black talons. "Oh my God," Eden whispered, the brass pipe slipping in her sweaty palms. Torin threw his head back and let out a guttural, feral snarl. His teeth stretched into long, jagged points. He lunged forward, pushing off the ground with explosive, inhuman speed. He aimed his sharp, deadly claws straight for Knox's throat. Knox did not dodge. He did not back away. He stood his ground, letting the charging monster come right at him. Eden screamed, waiting for the brutal impact to tear the man apart. Chapter 12. Torin flew through the air, his black talons aimed to kill. Knox raised his left hand to block the strike. As he lifted his arm, a brutal, snapping sound echoed from his knuckles. Eden watched from over his broad shoulder. Knox did not shift his whole body like the rival leader. He maintained deep, focused control. Only his left hand changed. His skin rippled, the bones in his fingers cracked, lengthening in a violent burst of speed. Thick, razor-sharp claws erupted from his fingertips, catching the bright chandelier light. Torin crashed into him. The heavy impact shook the floorboards. Knox caught Torin's wild strike with his shifted hand. The sharp claws clashed against each other with a harsh, scraping sound. Knox stood firm, absorbing the force of the leaping attack without taking a single step back. "You lack control," Knox growled, his voice rumbling with an animal edge. Torin snarled, twisting his large body to slash his other hand toward Knox's ribs. He aimed for a lethal blow, his eyes wild with the primal need to rip the alpha apart. Knox moved with terrifying precision. He twisted his wrist, breaking Torin's grip with brute strength. With a single, devastating swing of his clawed hand, Knox struck the rival leader across the chest. The blow landed with the force of a swinging wrecking ball. 4 deep, bloody lines tore through Torin's dirt-smudged shirt. The raw power of the strike lifted the large man off his feet. Torin flew backward through the air, crashing hard against a solid stone pillar on the far side of the grand hall. He hit the floor in a heavy heap of broken wood and dust. He rolled onto his side, gasping for air. He planted his palms on the floorboards, trying to push himself up, but his thick arms gave out. He collapsed against the cold stone, coughing hard. His shifted hands cracked and reformed, the dark fur fading as they turned back into normal, blunt fingers. The circle of 20 people remained frozen in place. Not a single person rushed forward to help Torin. They stared at Knox with wide, fearful eyes, dropping their shoulders and bowing their heads in total submission to their king. Knox lowered his left arm. The sharp, deadly claws on his hand slid back under his skin. His bones snapped back into their proper places with a sickening crunch. Within seconds, his hand looked normal again. The thick ring gleamed on his unbroken index finger. He did not spare a glance at the bleeding man groaning on the floor. He turned around to face Eden. A tiny blur of scruffy fur darted into the room. Buster ran past the bowing wolves and skidded to a halt next to Knox's boots. The terrier let out a happy bark, ignoring the tension and the smell of blood in the room. Eden stared at Knox's hands. Her chest heaved, fighting for air that felt too thick to breathe. The brass pipe felt heavy and useless in her sweaty grip. Her mind struggled to process the impossible violence she just witnessed. Bones breaking, claws tearing, monsters fighting in the middle of a grand foyer. Knox took a slow step toward her. The intense heat radiating from his chest hit her face like a physical wall. "It is over," Knox said. He reached out with his normal, human-looking hand to take the brass weapon from her tight grip. Eden scrambled backward. Her boot hit a piece of a smashed wooden chair, throwing her off balance. "You are a monster," she whispered, her voice fragile and thin in the quiet room. "Eden," Knox said, taking another steady step closer. "Don't touch me!" she yelled, raising the brass pipe up high like a desperate shield. "You have claws! He grew fur and claws!" The giant room started to spin. The bright lights from the crystal chandelier blurred into long, blinding yellow streaks. The heavy scent of fresh blood and old wood rushed into her nose, overwhelming her panicked senses. The tall walls of the stone estate seemed to tilt inward, crushing the remaining air out of her lungs. Her bruised toe throbbed in time with her racing pulse. "Your heart is beating too fast," Knox stated. His dark eyes narrowed in sudden alarm. He closed the distance between them in a flash of movement. Eden tried to swing the pipe, but her tired arms lost all their strength. The heavy brass weapon slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the floorboards. Her knees buckled under her own weight. The dark floor rushed up to meet her. Before she hit the broken wood, strong arms caught her waist. Knox pulled her flush against his broad, burning chest. The intense, comforting heat of his body was the last thing she felt before the black void swallowed her whole. Chapter 13. Eden opened her eyes. The ceiling above her spun in a slow, dizzying circle. She lay flat on her back, sinking into the plush mattress of the guest bed. Her dark uniform clung to her skin, stiff with dried sweat. The safety pin holding her broken zipper together dug a sharp point into her ribs. She shifted her weight, letting out a harsh groan. Her right boot dragged against the duvet. A dull throb pulsed inside the leather, a bitter reminder of kicking the solid wood paneling earlier. She flexed her hands. Her bruised knuckles flared with blunt, aching pain from striking the giant man's back. She rolled onto her side and reached into her pocket. Her fingers found the familiar shape of her dead smartphone and the dull brass key attached to the faded red lanyard. She kept her grip on the metal, drawing a fraction of comfort from the mundane objects. Eden pushed herself up into a sitting position. She looked across the dim room. The wooden doorframe hung in splintered pieces. The thick brass deadbolt rested useless against the cracked molding. The physical damage proved her memories were real. She did break the lock. She did run downstairs. She did see a man turn into a beast. "You passed out," a deep voice stated from the shadows. Eden flinched, pulling her knees to her chest. Knox sat in the corner reading chair. He kept his wide frame still, his legs stretched out over the thick rug. He still wore his dark suit. The torn fabric on his left sleeve exposed an inch of unbroken skin. On his right hand, the ring caught the low light from the bedside lamp. Buster lay curled in a scruffy ball on Knox's lap. The Jack Russell Terrier snored, oblivious to the tension suffocating the room. "I passed out because you grew knives out of your fingers," Eden whispered, her voice trembling. She stared at his left hand, searching for any sign of the horrific weapons she witnessed in the grand hall. His fingers looked normal, blunt, human, and clear of any dark fur. "They are claws," Knox corrected. He lifted his uninjured right hand and stroked the terrier's coarse fur. "And you fainted because your heart rate spiked to a dangerous level. Your human body shut down to protect your brain from the shock." "Human body," Eden repeated, testing the strange phrase. "You say that like it is a separate category, like you are not human." "I am a lycanthrope," Knox said, keeping his tone flat and level. "A wolf. My pack holds this territory. We keep the city borders clear of rogues and violence. The man I fought downstairs challenged my authority. I put him down to keep the peace." Eden gripped her brass key tighter. Her mind rejected the words. She lived in a cramped apartment. She dealt with late rent, bad tips, and a rusted plum Honda. Her world consisted of concrete, cheap beer, and exhaustion. Monsters belonged in horror movies, not standing in grand foyers and tailored suits. "Monsters aren't real," Eden muttered to the floor. "This is a trick, a hallucination. Someone slipped something into my drink at the club. You are just a mobster with a cult." "Look at me, Eden," Knox commanded. She kept her eyes locked on the splintered doorframe. If she looked at him, she would have to accept the impossible violence she saw downstairs. "Look at me," Knox repeated. He did not yell, but the raw, heavy power in his voice forced a reaction. Eden snapped her head up. Knox leaned forward in the reading chair. The shadows receded from his face. The jagged scar on his right eyebrow stood out against his pale skin. But his eyes were no longer dark. 2 rings of brilliant molten gold glowed in the dim room. The color radiated an unnatural, predatory light. The golden stare pierced straight through her, wild and ancient and utterly inhuman. Eden stopped breathing. The brass key slipped from her fingers, clattering against her dead smartphone in her pocket. The wall of fake sass she used to survive the nightclub crumbled into dust. She pressed her spine against the headboard, staring into the glowing eyes of a predator. Chapter 14. The golden glow faded. Knox blinked, and his eyes returned to their normal dark shade. He sat back in the reading chair, giving Eden space to process the impossible truth. Buster shifted on his lap, letting out a quiet sigh in his sleep. Eden clutched the duvet in her bruised fists. "Let me leave," she whispered, her chest heaving with rapid breaths. "I will not tell anyone. I will walk down that driveway, go back to the city, and pretend tonight never happened." Knox rolled his broad shoulders. "You cannot leave." "I am a bartender," Eden shouted, dropping her whisper. Panic pushed her voice to a frantic pitch. "I serve drinks. I do not belong in a werewolf war. Open the front gates and let me walk away." "Torin saw you," Knox stated, his voice remaining calm against her panic. "The man I fought in the hall. He survived the strike, and he holds deep influence over a faction of my pack. He knows you exist. He knows what you are to me." "I am nothing to you," Eden shot back. "I just wanted a tip to pay my landlord." "You are my mate," Knox growled. The sudden intensity in his tone vibrated against the stone walls. "The bond snapped into place the second you touched me in the VIP booth. Torin knows this. The rogues in the woods will know this soon. If you walk out of those gates alone, they will hunt you down. They will use your pain to break my control." Eden stared at him. The sheer weight of the danger crushed the air from her lungs. She pictured the giant man from the stairwell. She pictured the long, curved talons ripping through the air. A broken door lock at her apartment would not stop beasts that tore through solid wood. "I cannot hide here," Eden argued, desperation clawing at her throat. "I have a life. I have bills. My landlord expects $800 in cash tomorrow morning. He does not take checks. He does not take excuses. If I do not pay him, he will throw my mattress in the alley and change the locks. My apartment is the only safe place I have left." Knox watched her face. He tracked the genuine terror in her expression. The Alpha King fought brutal wars over territory and bloodlines, but the human girl sitting on his bed feared a missing rent payment more than the monsters in the woods. "Your safety is my burden now," Knox said. He lifted Buster off his lap and set the terrier on the rug. The dog curled up next to his boots. Knox stood up, towering over the furniture. The intense heat radiating from his chest hit Eden across the distance. "My landlord does not care about your burdens," Eden muttered, crossing her arms over her chest. "He cares about cash." "Then I will pay him," Knox decided. Eden blinked. "What?" "I will secure your human shelter," Knox said, walking toward the splintered doorframe. "I will pay the debt. Your belongings will remain untouched, but in exchange, you stay inside these walls. You do not run. You do not try to escape into the trees. You stay where I can protect you." Eden weighed the bargain. She had $84 in her tip jar. Her phone was dead. Her rusted Honda was miles away. She stood zero chance of walking out of the woods alive if the men with the claws hunted her. $800, Eden repeated, keeping her voice firm. "In cash, delivered to the landlord on 4th Street before dawn." "Done," Knox agreed. "And my car," Eden added, pushing her luck. "The plum Honda in the alley behind the club. It needs to be moved before it gets towed." Knox paused in the broken doorway. He glanced back at her, his dark eyes studying her stubborn posture. A faint, brief smirk touched his sharp jawline. "I will handle the Honda. Get some sleep, Eden. Tomorrow, you learn how this pack operates." He stepped out into the dark hallway, leaving her alone with the snoring terrier and the splintered remains of the doorframe. Chapter 15. An hour later, heavy footsteps approached the guest room. Eden sat at the edge of the bed, her boots resting on the thick rug. She kept her right hand in her pocket, tracing the edge of her brass key. Knox stepped into the doorway. A tall, broad-shouldered guard followed a step behind him. The guard kept his head bowed, showing absolute reverence to the Alpha King. He did not look at Eden. Knox turned to the guard. The ring flashed under the hallway lights. "Go to the estate's office and pull a stack of green bills from the safe," Knox ordered, his heavy tone leaving no room for failure. Take a vehicle to the human city. Go to the apartment building on 4th Street. Find the landlord. Pay the $800 debt in cash. Tell him the lease is secured for the rest of the year. Yes, Alpha, the guard nodded. Then go to the alley behind the nightclub, Knox continued. Locate the Honda. Have the vehicle towed to the secure garage on the east side of the estate. Understood, the guard replied. He turned on his heel and marched down the hallway, disappearing into the shadows. Eden let out a long, shaky breath. A knot of tension loosened in her chest. Her mattress would not end up in the alley. Her rusted car would not be crushed in an impound lot. For the first time all night, she felt a tiny fraction of control return to her life. Knox stepped through the splintered doorframe and walked into the bedroom. Eden shot up from the mattress. The moment of relief vanished. She held her hand out, palm flat, signaling him to stop. Stay on your side of the room, Eden stated, using the last of her fake sass to build a wall between them. You paid the rent. I agreed to stay inside the compound, but that does not mean you get to hover over me. I need space. Knox stopped in the center of the rug. He looked at her outstretched hand. He ran a hand through his dark hair, pushing the loose strands back from his forehead. I am the Alpha, Knox said, his voice a low rumble. I do not take commands in my own territory, especially not in my own house. I am not in your pack, Eden countered, refusing to lower her hand. Your heavy voice does not work on me. If we are trapped in this house together, we need rules. Rule 1, keep your distance. Knox took a slow, deliberate step forward. Eden held her ground, refusing to back away. Knox stopped mere inches from her fingertips. The staggering heat of his body washed over her in a suffocating wave. Up close, the size difference between them felt terrifying. He was a weapon wrapped in a tailored suit. His broad chest blocked out the light from the bedside lamp. I am keeping my distance, Knox murmured, looking down at her. If I wanted to close the gap, you would not be able to stop me. Eden swallowed hard. The truth in his words stung. She possessed a dull brass key and a bruised toe. He healed from stab wounds in seconds and ripped apart rival leaders with his bare hands. The power dynamic tilted entirely in his favor. Just back up, Eden whispered, her bravado faltering. Knox held her gaze for a long second. He read the genuine exhaustion in her eyes. He stepped back, giving her the space she demanded. He walked over to the reading chair in the corner and sat down. He crossed his arms over his chest and stretched his long legs out. Sleep, Eden, Knox instructed. I will guard the door. Eden looked at the splintered wooden frame. Without a lock, anyone could walk in. She needed him to stay, even if his presence terrified her. She climbed back onto the plush mattress, pulled her knees to her chest, and closed her eyes. Chapter 16. Morning sunlight poured through the iron bars of the window, cutting bright yellow streaks across the dark rug. Eden woke up with a stiff neck. She sat up, rubbing the sore muscles at the base of her skull. Her dark uniform felt like a layer of grime against her skin. She glanced at the reading chair. It was empty. She turned her head. Knox sat at a small wooden table near the mahogany wardrobe. A tall stack of thick manila folders rested in front of him. He held an expensive pen in his right hand, signing documents with rapid, sharp strokes. He wore the same raven black suit from the night before, the torn left sleeve still exposing his arm. A silver tray sat on the edge of the table. A plate of scrambled eggs and dry toast rested next to a heavy ceramic pot of black coffee. 2 ceramic mugs sat beside the pot. Buster slept soundly at the foot of the bed, his scruffy chin resting on Eden's boots. You did not sleep, Eden whispered, swinging her legs off the mattress. Knox did not look up from the files. The pack requires direction. Torrin's faction needs to be brought to heel before the full moon. The rogues are testing the eastern perimeter. Sleep is a luxury I cannot afford today. Eden stood up. She walked over to the table. The bruising on her toe made her limp slightly. She stopped across from Knox and studied his face in the harsh daylight. The Alpha King looked exhausted. Deep, dark circles shadowed his eyes. The brutal fight in the hall, the intense heat radiating from his skin, the endless paperwork. He carried the entire weight of the compound on his broad shoulders. The ruthless monster from the nightclub looked like a tired man trying to keep his family alive. Eden looked at the heavy ceramic pot. Steam rose from the spout. She reached out and grabbed the thick handle. She poured the hot black coffee into one of the ceramic mugs. She did not add milk. She did not add sugar. She set the hot mug down right next to his signing hand. "Drink," Eden said. Knox paused. He stared at the steaming mug. He looked up at Eden, a flicker of surprise crossing his sharp features. He reached for the ceramic handle. At the exact same moment, Eden pulled her fingers away. Their knuckles brushed against each other. A sharp, violent jolt of heat snapped between their skin. It felt like a live wire sparking in the quiet room. Eden gasped, snatching her hand back and pressing it against her chest. The sudden, burning connection sent a flush of intense warmth straight down to her toes. Knox froze. His dark eyes locked onto hers, burning with the sudden, primal intensity of the mate bond. The pen slipped from his grip, rolling across the manila folders and dropping onto the floorboards with a loud clatter. The air in the room grew heavy. The suffocating heat rolling off Knox's chest spiked, warming the space in seconds. He did not pull his hand away from the coffee mug. He stared at Eden, his jaw tight, fighting the wild instincts raging just beneath his skin. Eden took a slow step backward. Her heart hammered against her ribs, beating a frantic rhythm against the safety pin holding her dress together. The simple, accidental touch shattered the boundary she tried to set the night before. Knox stood up from the table. The wooden chair scraped loud against the floorboards. He abandoned the pack files. He abandoned the coffee. He turned his full, predatory focus entirely onto her. Chapter 17. Knox stepped toward her, the space between them shrinking in a heartbeat. The suffocating heat of his body pushed the cold air out of the room. Eden pressed her back against the wall. The jolt from their hands still burned a sharp path up her arm. She clutched her knuckles against her chest. "What was that?" Eden whispered. "You burned me." Knox opened his mouth to answer. A deafening wail shattered the quiet morning. The sound tore through the estate. It was a mechanical, grinding siren, blaring from speakers mounted high on the stone walls outside. The noise vibrated in the floorboards. Knox froze. The tension in his jaw hardened into a brutal line. The heat rolling off him spiked, turning the room into an oven. He turned his head toward the iron-barred window. Downstairs, heavy boots thundered across the ground floor. Shouts echoed up the grand staircase. "They breached the tree line," a rough voice yelled from the hallway. "Rogues at the iron gates!" Eden grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. "Rogues?" she repeated. "The monsters from the woods?" Knox ignored her whisper. He crossed the room in 2 long strides and yanked the splintered door open. The broken wood groaned on its hinges. A tall guard skidded to a halt in the hallway. He carried a long wooden staff with a wicked steel tip. "Alpha," the guard breathed hard. "Torin's men refused the perimeter shift. The eastern wall is open. A dozen rogues just hit the main gate." "Deacon," Knox commanded. His heavy voice carried the crushing weight of authority. "Take the human to the basement safe room. Lock the steel door. You do not leave her side until I come down." "Yes, Alpha," Deacon nodded, his grip tightening on his staff. Knox turned back to Eden. "Go with him." "I am not going into a basement," Eden argued, her panic rising. She pictured a dark, damp cellar filled with traps. "I want to leave. Let me out the back." "You will die before you reach the driveway," Knox stated. "Go." Buster let out a sharp bark. The terrier bounced on his front paws, feeling the sudden chaos in the room. Eden looked at the tiny dog, then at the massive man blocking the exit. Her bruised toe throbbed inside her boot. Her bruised knuckles ached. She had no weapon, no phone, and no car. "I will be trapped down there," Eden whispered to Buster, scooping the dog up into her arms. Knox heard her. "You will be alive down there." He did not wait for her to argue again. He spun around and sprinted down the hallway. He moved with that terrifying, unnatural speed, vanishing down the stairs in a blur of dark fabric. Deacon stepped into the room. "Move, human." Eden tightened her grip on the terrier. She limped past the guard, favoring her aching foot. They hurried down the corridor. The blaring siren outside drowned out her thoughts. She followed Deacon down a narrow servant staircase at the back of the house. The air grew colder with every step. They bypassed the ruined main hall. Eden caught a glimpse of the smashed furniture and blood-stained rugs from the fight last night. A fresh wave of fear hit her stomach. Deacon pushed open a heavy wooden door leading under the house. Stone steps descended into deep shadows. He hit a switch on the wall. A row of caged bulbs flickered on, casting harsh yellow light over a concrete floor. "Down," Deacon ordered, pointing his staff at the steps. Eden swallowed hard. She clutched the lanyard in her pocket with her free hand. She walked down the cold stairs. The basement felt like a bunker. Thick concrete walls replaced the rich plaster of the upper floors. At the far end of the long room, a heavy steel door stood open. It looked like a bank vault. Deacon marched past her and gestured to the opening. "Get inside." Eden stepped into the square room. It held a small cot, a jug of water, and an old stone fireplace built into the back wall. Next to the hearth sat a heavy iron fire poker, its hooked end resting on the concrete. Deacon stood in the doorway. He pulled the massive steel door shut. The lock engaged with a loud mechanical slam. Eden stood in the center of the bunker, holding the shaking dog, while the muffled sounds of war echoed from the ground above. Chapter 18. Eden set Buster down on the cot. The terrier spun in a tight circle, whining at the thick metal walls. The air in the safe room felt stale and cold. The single bulb hanging from the ceiling cast deep shadows in the corners of the bunker. "Stay quiet," Eden whispered to the dog. She rubbed her bruised knuckles. "If you bark, they will know we are down here." Buster ignored her command. He hopped off the cot and trotted over to the steel door. He pressed his wet nose against the crack at the bottom and let out a low rumble. Eden backed away from the entrance. She looked around the square room. Her eyes landed on the stone fireplace in the back wall. The hearth sat empty, wiped clean of any ash or wood. Leaning against the rough brick was the heavy iron fire poker. It had a thick, twisted handle and a sharp hook at the bottom. She kept her eyes on the steel door. On the other side of the metal, Deacon paced. The heavy thud of his work boots echoed against the concrete floor of the basement. Above them, the estate shuddered. The muffled crash of breaking glass drifted down from the ground floor. A heavy impact shook the ceiling, dropping a layer of fine dust onto Eden's dress. "The lock is thick," Eden muttered to herself, wrapping her arms around her chest. "They cannot break steel. We are safe." A guttural roar vibrated through the foundation. It sounded identical to the monstrous noise Torin made before he grew talons. The rogues were inside the house. Deacon stopped pacing. Eden held her breath. She stared at the center of the steel door. "Deacon?" she whispered. No answer came from the basement. A sudden, violent crash slammed against the concrete walls outside the safe room. The impact sounded like two cars colliding at high speed. A man let out a short, sharp yell. The sound of tearing fabric and a wet thud followed. Then, absolute silence. "Deacon?" Eden asked again, her voice shaking. Buster backed away from the door, his ears pinned flat against his scruffy head. He let out a terrified whimper and scrambled under the cot, hiding in the shadows. Eden's heart slammed against her ribs. She dug her hand into her pocket, gripping the key on her lanyard. It was a useless gesture. A house key would not stop a beast that just killed an armed guard. Heavy footsteps approached the safe room. They did not sound like Deacon's boots. These steps dragged, accompanied by the sharp scrape of bone against concrete. A heavy fist slammed against the steel door. Eden jumped, biting her lip to keep from screaming. The thick metal rattled in its frame. "Open up!" a raspy voice demanded from the other side. Eden backed up until her shoulders hit the stone fireplace. The rough brick scratched her skin. She did not make a sound. The fist pounded the steel again, harder this time. The metal groaned under the raw force. "I smell you in there, human. I smell your racing heart. The king locked his little prize in the basement." Eden's breath hitched. She looked at the iron fire poker leaning against the hearth. "You cannot hide," the raspy voice taunted. A sharp claw dragged down the surface of the steel door. The horrific screech of metal on metal echoed in the small room. "Torin said the king went soft. Torin said a human broke his focus. When I bring your head to the courtyard, the rest of this pack will surrender." Another brutal impact struck the door. The metal lock mechanism squealed. The heavy hinges buckled, whining under the immense pressure. Eden reached out with her right hand. Her fingers closed around the twisted handle of the iron fire poker. The metal felt ice cold and heavy. She lifted it off the concrete, testing the weight. It took both hands to hold it steady. The rogue slammed his weight against the door a fourth time. A loud crack snapped through the air. The thick steel locking bolt sheared in half. The heavy door groaned, shifting inward by a fraction of an inch. Eden raised the iron poker like a baseball bat. She ignored the throbbing pain in her bruised toe and planted her boots firm on the ground. She waited in the harsh yellow light as the heavy steel door swung open. Chapter 19. The heavy steel door slammed against the concrete wall with a deafening crash. A man stepped into the safe room. He ducked his head to clear the doorframe. He wore a filthy, torn leather jacket and faded jeans. Thick lines of fresh blood dripped from his chin, staining the collar of his shirt. His hands were already shifted. Long, curved black talons extended from his knuckles, clicking together as he flexed his fingers. His eyes locked onto Eden. The pupils were blown wide, glowing with a dull, unnatural yellow light. "There you are," the rogue grinned, exposing a row of elongated, jagged teeth. "Knox left you all alone." Eden did not waste time with fake sass. She did not whisper a complaint. Her survival instincts took total control. She tightened her grip on the iron fire poker and stared at the monster blocking her only exit. The rogue took a step forward, raising his clawed hands. "Drop the stick, human. I will make it quick." Eden swung. She threw her entire body weight into the motion. She pivoted on her bruised foot, channeling every ounce of fear and adrenaline into her arms. The heavy iron poker cut through the air with a low whistle. The rogue did not expect her to attack. He did not raise his arms to block. The solid iron hook smashed directly into the side of the rogue's face. The impact sounded like a sledgehammer hitting a block of wood. The sheer force of the blow shattered the rogue's jaw. A spray of dark blood erupted from his mouth. His head snapped to the side with brutal whiplash. The heavy man stumbled sideways, his boots tangled together. He crashed into the small cot, flipping the metal frame over. Buster darted out from underneath, scrambling into the far corner of the room. The rogue hit the concrete floor hard. He rolled onto his back, clutching his face with his talons. A wet, gargling scream tore from his throat. Eden stood over him, her chest heaving. The iron poker felt slick with sweat in her hands. The jolt of the impact traveled up her arms, vibrating in her bruised knuckles. "Stay down!" Eden shouted, her voice echoing off the bunker walls. The rogue thrashed on the ground. He pulled his hands away from his face. The right side of his jaw hung at a sickening, unnatural angle. The bone was pulverized. Blood poured down his neck, soaking his torn leather jacket. But the monster did not stay down. A horrific cracking sound filled the room. Eden watched in frozen terror as the rogue's jaw began to snap back into place. The shattered bones shifted under the skin, the ripped muscles knit together. The rapid healing process forced a low, animal growl from his chest. "No," Eden whispered, gripping the poker tighter. "You cannot heal that fast." The rogue pushed himself up onto his knees. His yellow eyes burned with pure, murderous rage. The impact did not kill him, it only made him angry. He spat a mouthful of blood and broken teeth onto the concrete floor. "Big mistake," the rogue snarled. His voice sounded thicker, slurred by the shifting bone, but the threat remained crystal clear. Eden raised the iron poker again. She aimed for the top of his skull. Before she could swing, the rogue lunged forward with explosive speed. His massive hand closed around the iron shaft of the poker. He did not flinch at the weight. With a single, violent jerk, he ripped the weapon out of her grasp. The sudden force threw Eden off balance. She stumbled forward, her boots slipping on the dusty concrete. She threw her hands out to catch herself, landing hard on her bruised knees. Pain shot up her legs. The rogue tossed the heavy iron poker across the room. It clattered against the stone fireplace, useless. Eden scrambled backward, trying to put distance between herself and the monster. She hit the metal wall of the bunker. She had nowhere left to run. The rogue rose to his feet. He wiped a streak of blood from his reformed jaw. He advanced on her, his black talons extended, ready to tear her apart. Chapter 20. The rogue grabbed Eden by the collar of her dress. He hoisted her off the concrete floor with one hand. Eden kicked her boots against his shins. She drove her bruised knuckles into his forearms. Hitting him felt like striking a solid oak tree. Her blows did zero damage. She reached into her pocket, desperate for the lanyard, but the awkward angle trapped her arm against her side. The monster slammed her flat against the metal wall of the bunker. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Black spots danced at the edge of her vision. The rogue stepped into her space, pinning her body with his sheer weight. The raw heat of his breath washed over her face, choking the air from her lungs. "I am going to enjoy this," the rogue growled. He raised his right hand. The 5 curved talons gleamed under the harsh yellow light. He aimed the sharp points at her chest, ready to plunge them through her ribs. Eden turned her head away and squeezed her eyes shut. She braced for the killing blow. A deafening, monstrous roar shook the foundations of the estate. It did not sound like a man shouting. It sounded like a giant, prehistoric beast trapped in a confined space. The rogue's eyes widened in sudden panic. He dropped his raised hand and spun his head toward the broken steel door. He did not have time to react. A massive blur of pure, terrifying violence shot through the doorway. It was not a man in a suit. It was a wolf. The beast was gigantic, standing as tall as a man's chest. Thick, coarse black fur covered its muscular frame. Its jaws were giant, lined with dagger-like teeth. The wolf crashed into the rogue like a speeding freight train. The impact ripped the rogue away from Eden. Eden slid down the metal wall, gasping for air. She dropped to her hands and knees. The giant black wolf pinned the rogue to the concrete floor. The rogue slashed wildly with his talons, trying to carve out the wolf's eyes. The beast dodged the strike with unnatural agility. It snapped its massive jaws shut around the rogue's right arm. A sickening crunch echoed in the bunker. The wolf's teeth crushed through the leather jacket, snapping the thick bones of the rogue's forearm in half. The rogue screamed, a high-pitched sound of absolute agony. The black wolf did not stop. It planted its heavy front paws on the rogue's chest, pinning the man flat. The beast leaned down, exposing its throat. For a split second, the wolf turned its head. 2 rings of brilliant molten gold glowed in the dark face. Eden's heart stopped. She recognized the eyes. The Alpha King did not just shift his hands, he surrendered to the beast. Knox turned back to the struggling rogue. He opened his massive jaws and clamped them directly over the man's throat. The rogue thrashed his legs against the concrete. His left hand clawed at the wolf's thick fur. Knox tightened his bite, driving his teeth deep into the flesh. He gave a single, brutal shake of his giant head. The thrashing stopped at once. The rogue's arms went limp, dropping to the dusty floor. Silence crashed back into the safe room, broken only by the heavy, wet breathing of the giant black wolf. Knox stood over the defeated enemy. Blood stained his dark muzzle. He released his grip, letting the rogue's head hit the concrete with a dull thud. Buster crept out from the corner. The tiny terrier trotted over to the massive wolf, unafraid. He sniffed Knox's giant paw and let out a soft whine. Knox ignored the dog. He turned his massive body toward Eden. Eden pressed her back against the bunker wall. Her hands shook. She stared at the giant, blood-soaked monster standing mere feet away. The wolf watched her with its glowing golden eyes, radiating a terrifying, untamed power. She was locked in a steel box with a lethal predator, and there was no door left to hide behind. Chapter 21. The giant black wolf stood over the dead rogue. Dark blood coated its muzzle, dripping onto the concrete floor with a quiet patter. Buster wagged his scruffy tail and let out a sharp, happy bark. The terrier showed zero fear. The wolf ignored the small dog and turned its giant head toward Eden. She stayed pressed against the bunker wall. Her bruised knees throbbed from the hard fall onto the floor. Her toe ached inside her boot. She clutched the dark fabric of her dress, her fingers trembling so hard she could barely make a fist. Her mind spun, unable to grasp the brutal reality of the dead beast lying feet away. The wolf lowered its broad head. A harsh, wet crack echoed in the cold room. The shift back to human form happened fast. Thick bones snapped and popped, reforming under the skin. The coarse black fur receded, melting away to reveal pale, scarred skin. Within seconds, the giant predator vanished. A broad-shouldered man knelt on the dusty concrete in its place. Knox was bare. The violent transformation destroyed his suit. Shredded strips of dark fabric littered the floor near the busted steel door, ruined beyond any repair. Dirt and fresh blood smeared his chest and arms. He stayed on his hands and knees for a long moment. His chest heaved as he dragged harsh breaths of oxygen into his lungs. Eden squeezed her eyes shut and turned her head toward the empty stone fireplace. "You don't have any clothes," she choked out. Knox stood up. The intense heat of his body pushed the chill out of the small room. He walked over to the ruined pile of fabric near the doorway. He crouched down and sifted through the torn shreds with blunt, human fingers. He retrieved the ring from the concrete floor. He slipped the thick metal band back onto his right index finger. He took it off right before the change to keep his finger intact. "Look at me," Knox ordered. His voice sounded rough, scraped raw from the monstrous roars. Eden kept her face turned away. "No, find some pants first." "Eden." Knox closed the distance between them in 2 wide strides. He grabbed her chin with his right hand, forcing her to face him. She gasped. The gold ring pressed cool against her jaw, a sharp contrast to his burning skin. His dark eyes burned with untamed fire. The glowing yellow light was gone, but the lethal predator remained staring back at her. "You fought him," Knox growled. His gaze dropped to her bruised, raw knuckles, then tracked across the room to the heavy iron poker resting on the floor. "I hit his jaw," Eden whispered, her voice shaking. "It didn't stop him. He healed." "You could have died," Knox said. His grip on her chin tightened, just short of causing actual pain. "You are human. You do not fight rogues. You run." "He cornered me," Eden shot back, her fake sass flaring up as a shield. "What did you expect me to do? Let him claw my chest open while I waited for you?" Knox let go of her chin. He slid his hands into her dark hair, ruining the messy knot she tied hours ago. He tilted her head back, exposing her throat. "I expected you to stay safe behind the steel door." "He broke the steel." "I know," Knox rumbled, his chest vibrating against her. "And I tore his throat out for it." He didn't give her a single second to respond. Knox crashed his mouth down on hers. The kiss was fierce, desperate, and possessive. It held zero gentle romance. It was pure, unrefined claim. The heat rolling off his chest warmed her shivering skin. Eden's brain short-circuited. She knew she should push him away. He ran a wild, violent pack in the woods. but the mate bond flared to life, sending a searing jolt of heat through her veins. She kissed him back. She raised her hands and gripped his broad shoulders. Her bruised knuckles throbbed in protest, but she ignored the pain. She tangled her fingers in his dark hair, pulling him closer. Knox groaned, a deep, rumbling sound. He wrapped his strong arms around her waist, lifting her boots off the floor. Buster let out a loud, chaotic yip from the corner of the bunker. The sharp noise broke the trance. Eden shoved her palms against his chest, breaking the kiss. She gasped for air, her heart slamming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Knox set her feet back on the concrete. He rested his forehead against hers. "You are mine. No one touches you." "We need to get out of this basement," Eden whispered, her face flushed red. "And you need to find some clothes." Knox stepped back, breaking the physical connection. "Come on. The attack is over." Chapter 22. Knox grabbed a torn, filthy piece of his ruined suit from the floor. He wrapped the scrap of fabric around his waist, creating a makeshift barrier. It was barely enough to pass for decent, but Eden didn't complain. She scooped Buster up into her arms, keeping her eyes fixed on the ceiling to avoid looking at the dead rogue on the floor. They walked out of the safe room. The heavy steel door hung useless on its buckled hinges. The thick locking bolt lay sheared in half on the concrete. Knox led the way up the dark stairwell. They stepped out onto the ground floor of the estate. The morning sunlight poured through the smashed windows, illuminating total destruction. The grand foyer was a disaster zone. Broken glass coated the polished hardwood. Deep, jagged claw marks scarred the rich plaster walls. Several pack members moved through the space, dragging the lifeless bodies of rogue attackers out the front doors. The fighting was brutal, leaving bloodstains soaking into the expensive rugs. Eden clutched the terrier tighter. Her bruised toe throbbed with every step she took across the ruined floorboards. She checked her pocket, feeling the familiar shapes of her key and phone. She had to stay grounded. "Alpha!" a tall woman called out. She jogged over, holding a folded stack of clothes. She handed them to Knox, keeping her eyes cast down in strict submission. "The perimeter is secure. Torin's men stood down after you killed the rogue leader. The breach is contained." "Good," Knox said. He took the clothes. He pulled on a pair of dark sweatpants and a simple gray shirt right there in the hall. "Get a builder team down to the basement. I want that steel door replaced by nightfall. And send someone to fix the wooden frame in the guest room." "Right away," the woman nodded, rushing off to follow his orders. Knox turned to Eden. "We are going to my quarters. I will not let you out of my sight until the doors are fixed." "I want to go back to the human city," Eden stated, holding her ground. "You paid my rent. My landlord has the cash. I held up my end of the bargain. I survived the night." Knox stopped. He stared at her, his jaw set in a hard line. He closed the distance between them, ignoring the pack members cleaning up the blood around them. "The bargain changed the moment that rogue broke the steel door," Knox said. His heavy tone carried a final, uncompromising weight. "They know you exist. They know you are my weakness. You cannot go back to wiping bars and serving drinks. You will stay here." "I don't belong here," Eden argued, gesturing to the smashed chandeliers and the claw marks on the walls. "I don't have claws. I don't heal in 5 seconds. I am just a girl with a bad car and a broken zipper." "You are more than that," Knox countered. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of dark, wavy hair behind her ear. The simple touch sent another jolt of heat racing down her neck. "You stared down a shifted rogue with a piece of iron. You did not break. You did not submit. The pack saw you challenge Torin last night. They respect strength." "They respect monsters," Eden whispered, her voice trembling. "I am not one of you." Knox dropped his hand. He took a step back, giving her space to breathe. He stood tall amid the ruins of his home. "The pack demands a Luna, a queen to stand beside the king. I want you to take the title." Eden stared at him. The words echoed in her ears. drowning out the sounds of the cleanup crew. Queen. Luna. The titles sounded like pure fantasy, disconnected from her reality of unpaid bills and cheap apartments. "You are insane," Eden breathed out. She backed away from him, shaking her head. "I am a bottle girl. I drop drinks on tables. I don't rule people." "You will rule them with me," Knox stated, leaving no room for debate. "The elders will call a trial this afternoon. You will prove your worth to the pack." Eden's panic flared, hot and suffocating. She turned on her heel and marched toward the grand staircase, needing to escape his heavy, commanding presence before she lost her mind. Chapter 23. Eden marched up the grand staircase, her boots stomping loud against the carpet runner. She ignored the pain shooting up from her bruised toe. Buster squirmed in her arms, letting out a confused whine. Knox followed close behind her, his silent, predatory footsteps a stark contrast to her heavy stomps. They reached the second floor. Eden bypassed the guest room with the splintered wooden frame. She didn't know where Knox's quarters were, so she stopped in the middle of the long, dim hallway and spun around to face him. "A trial?" Eden whispered aloud, pacing a tight circle on the rich rug. "He wants me to stand trial in front of giant wolf people. I don't even know their rules. I'm going to fail. They will throw me in the woods to be hunted." Knox stood still, watching her spiral. He crossed his arms over his broad chest. The gray shirt stretched tight across his muscles. "No one is throwing you in the woods." Eden stopped pacing. She glared at him. "Stop listening to my whispers. It isn't fair that you have super hearing." "You are speaking out loud," Knox pointed out, his tone calm. "Because I am having a panic attack," Eden yelled, dropping the whisper. She set Buster down on the floor. The terrier trotted over to Knox and sat on his boot. Eden threw her hands in the air. "Look at me! Look at this dress! It has a safety pin holding it together because I couldn't afford a $10 repair. My phone has a shattered screen. My car is a rusted plum disaster. I am broke. I am ordinary. I will ruin your reputation if you parade me in front of your pack." Knox uncrossed his arms. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "My reputation?" "Yes!" Eden grabbed the dull brass key in her pocket, using the metal to ground her racing thoughts. "You are the Alpha King. You wear a solid gold ring. You live in a stone estate. Your people bow to you. If you bring a broke human waitress to the throne, they will laugh at you. Torin was right. They will think you went soft." Knox closed the gap between them in a flash of speed. Before Eden could take a step back, he caught her by the waist. He spun her around and pinned her back against the hallway wall. He didn't use his full strength, mindful of her bruised knees and knuckles, but the hold was unbreakable. The intense heat of his body trapped her against the cool plaster. He leaned in close, his face inches from hers. The jagged scar on his right eyebrow pulled tight. "Listen to me," Knox growled, his heavy voice vibrating against her chest. "I do not care about the car. I do not care about the broken zipper. Torin challenged my choice, and I broke his chest for it. If any elder laughs at you, I will break them too." Eden's breath hitched. She stared into his dark eyes, searching for a lie. She found nothing but raw, brutal honesty. "You can't just fight your whole pack for me." "I will," Knox promised, his tone dead serious. "You are my mate. The bond chose you. The moment you danced on me in that club, your life became mine to protect. You are the only thing I care about." The fierce declaration knocked the wind out of her. It wasn't a sweet, romantic confession. It was a heavy, possessive vow from a dangerous predator. It terrified her, but deep down, a tiny spark of warmth ignited in her chest. No one had ever fought for her before. She spent her whole life scraping by, invisible and exhausted. Now a king was willing to tear his world apart to keep her safe. "The elders will hate me," Eden whispered, dropping her gaze to his chest. "Let them," Knox replied. He released his grip on her waist, taking a half step back to give her room to breathe. You don't need them to like you. You just need them to submit to you. How do I do that? She asked, rubbing her bruised knuckles. Knox offered a sharp, dangerous smirk. You use the exact same attitude you used when you demanded an $800 tip from a stranger. Chapter 24. The main hall was cleared of the broken furniture by mid-afternoon. The bloodstains were scrubbed from the hardwood, leaving the grand room looking cold and formal. A long, dark oak table sat in the center of the space. Eden stood by the grand fireplace. She still wore her dark dress and boots. She refused Knox's offer of new clothes. She didn't want to hide who she was. She kept her right hand in her pocket, gripping her lanyard and the brass key. 3 older pack members sat behind the long table. They wore tailored suits, radiating an arrogant, superior energy. They were the elders. Knox stood in the corner of the room, his arms crossed, watching the proceedings with dark, calculating eyes. He promised not to interfere unless they threatened her physically. Buster slept on a plush rug near Knox's boots, snoring soft. The elder in the middle, a stern woman with silver hair named Maeve, looked down her nose at Eden. This is a waste of time. A human cannot be Luna. She has no wolf. She has no strength to offer the pack. The man on her left, Orson, sneered. She shakes with fear. Look at her shoes. Look at her posture. She does not even know how to stand like royalty. Eden bit her lip. Her bruised toe throbbed, making her want to shift her weight, but she planted her boots firm on the floorboards. She took a deep breath. She pictured the loud, flashing nightclub. She pictured the rich, entitled men who sat at the VIP booths, demanding respect they didn't earn. These elders were no different. They were just arrogant patrons sitting at a table. Eden let go of the brass key. She pulled her hand out of her pocket. She raised her chin, throwing up the familiar, impenetrable wall of fake sass. "My posture is fine," Eden stated, her voice ringing clear in the quiet hall. She did not whisper. "And my boots have lasted longer than your security gates did this morning." Maeve's eyes widened in shock. Orson slammed a flat palm against the oak table. "You dare speak to us with that tone?" Orson demanded, his voice dropping into a heavy, dominant rumble. He tried to use a command push, projecting his authority across the room to force her to cower. The push hit Eden. It felt like a loud gust of wind. It did nothing to her human mind. Eden crossed her arms over her chest, mimicking Knox's stubborn stance. "I speak to you however I want. You sit behind a fancy table while your king bleeds to protect your borders. You didn't fight the rogues last night. You hid." The third elder, a quiet man with a scarred jaw, leaned forward. He watched Eden with newfound interest. "She does not bow to the push. She has nerve." "Nerve is not strength," Maeve snapped, recovering from her shock. She glared at Eden. "You are fragile. If a rogue attacks you again, you will break. A Luna must be a shield for the pack, not a liability." "I killed a rogue this morning," Eden lied, keeping her face still. "With a piece of iron, while your guards were dying in the hallway. Ask your king if you don't believe me." The 3 elders turned their heads to look at Knox in the corner. Knox did not correct her. He let a slow, proud smirk touch his lips. He gave a single, firm nod. The lie became pack truth in an instant. Murmurs broke out among the guards standing by the double doors. The atmosphere in the room shifted. The cold, dismissive glares from the elders turned into looks of cautious evaluation. A fragile human was a liability. A human who bludgeoned a shifted wolf to death in a basement bunker was a wild card. "She is bold," Orson muttered, leaning back in his chair. Eden didn't let up. She walked right up to the edge of the oak table. She planted her bruised knuckles flat on the wood, leaning into their space. "I don't care about your titles," Eden told the 3 elders, her dark eyes locking onto Maeve. "I don't care about your old rules. Your alpha chose me. If you have a problem with it, you can take it up with him in the courtyard. Otherwise, stop wasting my time." The grand hall fell dead silent. Even Buster stopped snoring. No one had ever spoken to the High Council with such blatant, casual disrespect. Eden held her breath, waiting for the explosion, hoping her VIP hustle was enough to keep her alive. Chapter 25. The silence in the grand hall stretched tight. Eden kept her bruised knuckles pressed flat against the oak table. She refused to break eye contact with Maeve. Her bruised toe throbbed inside her boot, sending sharp spikes of pain up her leg, but she locked her knees. She couldn't show weakness now. Orson's face turned a dark, furious red. He pushed his chair back. The wood scraped loud across the floorboards. He stood up, towering over the table. "You disrespect the council," Orson roared. He didn't just yell. He threw a wave of dominant power straight at her. The force of his voice hit the room like a punch to the gut. By the double doors, 4 heavy guards dropped straight to their knees. They clamped their hands over their ears and bowed their heads. The scarred elder next to Orson flinched, leaning away from the outburst. Eden just stood there. The push washed over her like a warm breeze. She didn't feel the urge to kneel. She didn't feel anything but a sharp, burning annoyance. She pulled her hands off the table and rested them on her hips. "Are you done yelling?" Eden asked. Her voice cut through the ringing silence. "Because my ears are ringing and I haven't slept and you're giving me a headache." Orson stared at her. His mouth opened but no sound came out. He looked at the guards kneeling by the door, then back to the fragile human girl who didn't even flinch at his command. "She doesn't submit," the scarred elder murmured, genuine awe leaking into his voice. "The Alpha command has 0 effect on her mind." "Of course it doesn't," Eden whispered to herself, rolling her eyes. "I deal with drunk guys twice his size every weekend. Yelling doesn't pay the bills." Knox heard the whisper. He stayed in the corner of the room, but a low, vibrating chuckle rumbled in his chest. The sound drew the attention of the entire room. The king was amused. That shifted the dynamic in a heartbeat. The guards by the door got back to their feet, trading respectful glances. Maeve folded her hands on top of the oak table. The stern woman studied Eden with cold calculation. "You mock our ways. You stand in the center of our stronghold and treat this trial like a joke." "I treat it like a business meeting," Eden corrected. She shifted her weight, trying to relieve the pressure on her bruised foot. "You want to know if I'm strong enough to be your queen. You want a shield. I get it. But standing around yelling at me proves nothing. The rogues broke your gate this morning. Your guards died. If you want to talk about weakness, let's talk about how a dozen mutts walked right up to your front door." The hall erupted in loud whispers. The guards muttered to each other. Eden hit a raw nerve. Maeve's eyes flashed with anger. "You know nothing of our border defenses." "I know they failed," Eden shot back, leaning forward again. "And I know I was locked in a concrete box when one of those rogues ripped the steel door off its hinges. I didn't hide. I didn't wait for permission. I picked up a piece of iron and fought back. I survived." Orson sat back down. The furious red color drained from his face. "She killed one of Torin's rogues," he muttered to Maeve, keeping his voice low. Eden heard the name. Torin, the rival leader who grew talons the night before. "Yes, I did," Eden confirmed, proving she caught the name. "So if you want to test my strength, bring me a real threat. Stop trying to push me down with your loud voices. It doesn't work on me and it's boring." The scarred elder let out a loud, barking laugh. He slammed his hand on the table. "I like her. She has fire. The king needs a mate who won't break under pressure. She stood her ground against Torin yesterday, and she stands her ground against us today." Maeve pursed her lips. She looked over at Knox. The Alpha King stepped out of the shadows. He walked to the center of the hall, the heat of his body warming the cold air. He stopped right beside Eden. "The trial is clear," Knox stated, his voice carrying undeniable authority. "She holds her ground." Before Maeve could call for a final vote, the heavy double doors at the back of the hall swung open. A loud crash echoed through the room. Chapter 26. Torin shoved his way into the grand hall. The rival leader looked furious. 4 thick, pale pink scars stretched across his chest beneath his torn shirt, the only remaining proof of the brutal cuts Knox gave him the night before. His rapid healing had closed the wounds, but his pride was still bleeding. 2 of his loyal followers trailed behind him, looking nervous under the hard glare of the king's guards. Eden tensed. Her bruised knees ached, a sharp reminder of the bunker. She kept her hands out of her pockets, refusing to reach for the brass key. She needed to look fearless. Knox didn't step in front of her. He stayed right by her side, letting the intense heat of his skin offer silent support. He kept his word. He let her fight her own battle. Torin stopped 10 feet away from the oak table. He glared at the elders, then turned his pale, wild eyes on Eden. "You cannot vote her in," Torin spat, his voice rough and uneven. "I invoke the old laws of the territory. A Luna must bring value to the pack. She must bring land or bloodlines or wealth. This human brings nothing. She is a broke waitress from a filthy city club. She is a parasite." Orson frowned, looking at Maeve. "The old law does require a contribution to the stronghold." Eden didn't wait for Knox to defend her. She took 2 steps forward, closing the distance between herself and Torin. The rival leader towered over her, but she didn't look up. She kept her chin level, fixing him with a cold, unbothered stare. "A parasite?" Eden asked, her tone mocking and sharp. "That's a big word for a guy who couldn't even protect his own territory this morning." Torin bared his teeth. "Watch your mouth, human." "No, you watch yours," Eden fired back, her voice ringing off the plaster walls. "Last night, you called me a fragile little human waitress. You said I shake at loud noises. You told the whole room I was a pathetic creature." Torin puffed his chest out, ignoring the tight pull of his fresh scars. "And I was right." Eden let out a short, harsh laugh. "Were you? Because this fragile little waitress was locked in the basement when your perimeter failed. I stood in front of a rogue twice my size. I took an iron poker and I shattered his jaw. I held the line while you and your men let the enemy walk right through the eastern gates." Torin's face went pale. The 2 followers behind him shifted on their feet, looking down at the floorboards. "You talk about bringing value to the pack," Eden continued, pacing a slow circle around him. She ignored the throbbing pain in her toe. "What value do you bring? You challenge the king during a war. You divide the guards. You let rogues breach the gates. The only thing you brought to this stronghold today was a security threat." The hall remained silent. The guards by the doors watched Torin with hard, judging eyes. The tide turned fast. "She lies!" Torin yelled, pointing a thick finger at her. "She didn't kill anyone. She is weak." "Then why are your men looking at the floor?" Eden asked, stopping right in front of him. "Why are the elders listening to me instead of you? You want to banish me because you know the truth. A broke human waitress from a city club has more spine than you do." Torin let out a furious snarl. He dropped his hand, his fingers twitching as if he wanted to shift and grow talons right there in the hall. Knox moved. He didn't rush. He took a single, slow step forward. The ring flashed under the chandelier light. The heavy, suffocating threat of his presence hit Torin like a brick wall. "Shift your hands, Torin," Knox offered, his voice dropping into a lethal, rumbling purr. "Give me a reason to finish what I started last night." Torin looked at the Alpha King. He looked at the furious, burning heat radiating from Knox's dark eyes. Then he looked at Eden. She stood her ground, her fake sass locked into place, unfazed by his anger. The rival leader broke. He lowered his head, dropped behind his gaze to the polished floorboards. He took a step back, conceding the space. "She has no bloodline," Torin muttered, a pathetic final complaint. "She has my bloodline now," Knox stated. He turned his attention to the oak table. "The challenge is done. Call the vote, Maeve." Chapter 27. Maeve stood up from her chair. The stern woman looked at Torin, disgusted by his display of weakness. Then she looked at Eden. The cold judgment in the elder's eyes melted into a rigid, formal respect. "The old laws demand value," Maeve declared, her voice carrying across the grand hall. "Courage and defense of the king's mate hold the highest value. The human proved her strength. She did not break under the command push. She stood against a rival. She survived a rogue attack." Orson stood up next to her. He didn't look happy, but he bowed his head in a jerky, stiff motion. "I cast my vote for the king's choice." The scarred elder stood up last, a wide grin breaking across his face. "I vote yes. Long live the Luna." Maeve gave a single deep nod. "The council accepts her. The pack recognizes the bond. The trial is concluded." A collective sigh of relief washed through the room. The heavy tension in the air vanished. The guards by the double doors pounded their fists against their chests in a rhythmic, booming salute. Buster woke up from his nap, startled by the noise, and let out a string of happy barks. Eden's knees trembled. The heavy wall of fake sass she kept propped up for the last hour crumbled. The adrenaline crashed out of her system, leaving behind raw exhaustion and aching bruises. She grabbed the edge of the oak table to keep from falling over. Knox was there in a second. He wrapped a strong arm around her waist, taking her weight. The intense heat of his body soaked into her tired muscles. "I've got you," Knox murmured, his voice gentle. He looked at the guards. "Clear the hall. The queen needs rest." Torin turned and limped out the doors without another word. The elders packed up their papers and left the room. Within minutes, the grand hall was empty, save for Knox, Eden, and the bouncing terrier. "Come on," Knox said. He didn't throw her over his shoulder this time. He supported her side, helping her walk. They moved up the grand staircase. Eden favored her bruised toe, leaning heavily against his side. They reached the second floor. They walked right past the guest room. The splintered wooden door frame was currently being measured by two builders with tape and tools. Knox led her to the far end of the hallway. He pushed open a set of heavy double doors, revealing his private quarters. The room was huge, decorated in dark wood and rich fabrics. A giant stone fireplace dominated the back wall. Large windows looked out over the dense woods. The space felt clean, free of the blood and dirt from downstairs. Knox walked her to the edge of a huge, plush bed. He let go of her waist so she could sit down. Eden sank into the soft mattress, dropping her head into her hands. Her bruised knuckles throbbed in time with her heartbeat. Buster trotted into the room, hopped onto a velvet armchair in the corner, and went back to sleep. Knox crouched down in front of her. He stayed in his human form, wearing the dark sweatpants and gray shirt. He reached out and gently pulled her hands away from her face. His thumbs traced the purple bruises on her knuckles. "You fought a war today," Knox said, his dark eyes searching her face. "You don't have to fight anymore. You are safe here." Eden looked at the Alpha King. She thought about her cramped, freezing apartment. She thought about the endless shifts, the bad tips, and the constant fear of eviction. She thought about how this terrifying, violent predator stood between her and a room full of monsters, demanding respect on her behalf. She didn't want to leave. She didn't want to go back to 4th Street. Eden took a deep breath. She dropped the whispers. She didn't mutter to the floor. She looked straight into his dark eyes and spoke with pure clarity. "I don't want to go back," Eden said loud and clear. "I want to stay here. I want you." Knox froze. The golden rings flared to life in his eyes, burning with a fierce, untamed heat. He stood up, pulling her off the mattress and into his chest. Chapter 28. The next morning, bright sunlight flooded the stone courtyard behind the estate. The air felt crisp and fresh, chasing away the dark shadows of the rogue attack. Eden leaned against a smooth stone balcony overlooking the yard. She wore a pair of soft gray sweatpants and an oversized black sweater she borrowed from Knox's wardrobe. The heavy fabric swallowed her frame, but it felt warm. Her bruised knees and knuckles still ached, but the sharp, frantic pain was gone. She felt rested. She felt safe. Down in the grass, Buster was losing his mind. The scruffy terrier ran in wild, chaotic circles, chasing a bright yellow butterfly. He leaped into the air, his jaws snapping at empty space, before tumbling backward into a patch of dirt. He popped right back up, shook his coarse coat, and resumed the hunt. Eden laughed, a real, genuine sound that carried across the courtyard. The heavy oak doors behind her opened. Knox walked out onto the balcony. He wore fresh, dark clothes, his broad shoulders relaxed. The intense, burning heat of his body radiated into the cool morning air, wrapping around Eden like a heavy blanket. He stepped up right behind her. He didn't ask for permission. He slid his strong arms around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on the top of her head. "The builders finished the guest room door," Knox murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "They put a new steel lock on the basement bunker, too." Eden leaned into his warmth. She rested her hands over his arms, feeling the smooth gold band of the ring on his right finger. "Good. Let's hope we never have to use that bunker again. I've had enough of iron fire pokers for one lifetime." Knox chuckled, the sound vibrating through her spine. Torin packed his things and left the territory before dawn. He took a few of his loyal men with him. The pack is quiet. The borders are secure. "So we get a boring day?" Eden asked, tilting her head back to look at him. "Boring is a luxury," Knox replied, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "I plan to enjoy it." Eden turned around in his arms. She rested her hands flat against his chest. She thought about the bargain they made 2 nights ago in the guest room. The panic and fear felt like a lifetime away, but one loose end still nagged at her brain. "Hey," Eden started, her fake sass returning with a playful edge. "Your guard went to the human city yesterday to pay my landlord." "He did," Knox confirmed. $800 in cash. Your old lease is settled. The landlord won't bother you again." "Right. Thank you for that," Eden said, tracing a finger over the fabric of his shirt. "But what about my car? Did he get it out of the alley before the city towed it? That thing has bad suspension and a cracked mirror, but it's the only thing I own." Knox let out a slow sigh, shaking his head. He took her hand and led her to the far edge of the stone balcony. He pointed down toward the secure garage on the east side of the estate. The heavy metal doors were rolled wide open, revealing the polished concrete floor inside. Eden leaned over the railing and looked down. Parked in the center of the pristine garage was Knox's sleek, matte, raven black SUV. It looked expensive, dangerous, and well-maintained. Parked right next to it, taking up an equal amount of space, was her rusted plum Honda Civic. The cracked driver's side mirror caught the morning sunlight. The dented bumper looked out of place next to the King's Ride, but it was there, safe behind the iron gates. "I had it towed," Knox told her, wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "It isn't going anywhere." Eden stared at the ridiculous sight of the 2 cars sitting side by side, a broke waitress and an Alpha King, a rusted Honda and a luxury SUV. It shouldn't make sense, but it did. She looked up at Knox. The jagged scar on his eyebrow gave him a violent edge, but his dark eyes held nothing but steady, protective warmth. She smiled, dropping the sassy act. "It looks perfect right there," Eden said. Buster let out a triumphant bark from the grass below, having finally caught the butterfly. Knox pulled her close, the intense heat of the mate bond sealing the deal. The hustle was over. She was right where she belonged. The end. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Eden was bold for grinding on the Alpha King just to pay her rent, wait until you meet the heroine in this next story on your screen. You have to hear this disaster unfold. Click the video on your screen right now. It is pure chaos.